heat pump water heaters are one of the measures that we're doing in our properties, but it is definitely not, a heat pump water heater program. I don't know that those exist necessarily, but we're fitting that into just a whole home approach. Talk a little bit about how we're trying to figure out like where the right times are to actually use that technology. It's just still a big question. It's in flux for us. And then I would love to kind of get your guys' feedback and thoughts on, what we might want to think about as we continue to build our program and, just like how can we ensure that we're getting heat pumps or like doing the right thing, I guess, like, getting more heat pump water heaters out there, getting, serving more people and doing so in a way that I think de-risks that investment for them. So they're, we're not risking their energy costs basically going up. That's one of our concerns in Philly, where gas is very cheap. So I have a deck that I'm happy to share and kind of walk through. I find that always helps me organize my thoughts. So
That's great.
sort of
Thank you.
start there. So just first of all, just to back up all the way, I'm with the Energy Authority in Philadelphia. We're a municipal quasi-governmental organization. So we, don't belong to city council. We don't belong to the mayor. We sort of sit in between and have this sort of more infrastructure horizon thinking where, we're thinking about city, these impacts over the next 30 years versus our administration that's always thinking in these bite-sized 4-year increments. And, so how do we create programs and, projects that further economic opportunities, job creation, poverty alleviation, and public health improvements, and, really looking at energy as the primary tool to advance those goals. We're currently we're in year 8 of our energy initiative, which is to bring in $1 billion of investment to the city, through energy projects, and use that investment to create 10,000 jobs. And we're like 50% of the way, and like in a very much a hockey stick growth curve. So given all the IRA investments that are coming down, our $1 billion goal will be very, very much met in the next couple of years. So we're really excited about that. The context of our work is, being based in Philadelphia, America's biggest poorest big city rather. We have about a 25% poverty rate with a very old housing stock and a really high rate of home ownership. So it's an interesting combination of issues there, where we have basically households that have owned their homes from back in 60s, 70s, 80s that have not necessarily had the capital to continue with the maintenance needs of those properties. And that's led what the Federal Reserve estimates that we now have about $3.7 billion of repair needs. This is for the statistical area, but a lot of that is concentrated in Philly. All these deferred maintenance needs for our properties, and this is even before we start to think about energy performance improvements. It's really just like basic system issues in these properties. All of that has led to a range of negative outcomes. We have a really, really high level of asthma, and especially among children. And I think housing conditions are very easily tied to that. We have, there's a lot of reasons for heat differentials in our communities, but tree canopy is one of them. It's compounding already difficult conditions for folks. And then we have energy burden and energy insecurity outcomes here as well. And all of this with a extremely high unemployment rate for especially Black and African American folks in Philly. So looked at in one way, this is like a catastrophe. In another way, it's a huge opportunity for us to make giant impacts on our population in Philadelphia, and also do that in a way that puts equity first, not just in the folks that we're helping, but also in sort of thinking about this, the equation of poverty from both sides of like, what is your cost of living, and also how much base income you have. So if we can address the costs of staying in these homes by reducing that energy burden, that's going to have a huge impact. But then if we can also create well-paying jobs, that's going to have another, incredible impact on these communities. So we're trying to think of it holistically in that way as well. One thing that's not noted here is that in Philadelphia we have a host, like 20 something, programs that are really thinking about, the home and, either home repairs or thinking about, kind of conditions around the home with the rearages and, other kind of support services, all kind of operating independently, all marketing themselves independently with our own intake processes and, service delivery models. And it's very difficult for people in the city to navigate, right? Uh, the rate of deferrals for programs alone, we see about 25 to 50%, depending on the year, for weatherization itself, just like not being able to serve people because they should not have applied to weatherization first. They should have gone to a different program to get some basic repairs, then come back to weatherization. It's kind of an impossible situation for people to navigate on their own. But there are a lot of resources available. And so we're trying to essentially just take advantage of what already exists in Philly, to build on that to deliver, a much better product for our households. So again, instead of just patching up a roof that's been leaking, what can we, while we're in that home, can we think about insulating that roof cavity? Can we think about getting solar up there if that makes sense? What other opportunities are there to weatherize, to do other things in that home? Again, taken program by program, you're only going to get so far, but if we can layer these things together, we can do quite a bit more. And so Built to Last is essentially the administrative pathway to do that. So how do we get all these programs to orchestrate, to align? And that sort of falls into three buckets of work. The first part is to screen our participants so that we understand what they're actually eligible for and do that kind of comprehensively. We collect any information that's needed for any of our affiliate programs and actually collect information and documentation that's needed and complete any applications that are required and confirm that our clients are eligible and are enrolled in those services, so that we know what resources we're going to have available to us on that home repair. We then go to the home with our own auditor, who's taking, again, a kind of top to bottom look at that property to understand what needs to happen here, from kind of basic repairs, again, like roofs, structural issues, plumbing, electrical issues. And again, not even talking about upgrades, just what is broken that needs to be fixed, but then also what are the opportunities for energy efficiency, for health improvement, for electrification, and really, just document everything top to bottom and then align those things, right? So if we see that we have weatherization needs, making sure that the weatherization program, if they qualify for that by income, that program is lined up to deliver those specific measures for that project, but that that work is being done in the proper timeline, right? So we've seen a lot of projects where the weatherization program has come to us. We have a project where there's asbestos in the basement. We basically can't do anything, but knowing that you guys are going to remediate that asbestos, we're lined up to do X, Y, and Z in that property. So either we're accepting clients as referrals from folks who otherwise would have been deferred, or we kind of start them right at the beginning, where we do our intake, and then kind of get them ready to participate in all these different partner programs. So we have resources that we're basically bringing to the table to do that initial intake, to do a property assessment that's kind of comprehensive, and then we also have a resource that does that coordination of all the different services, including work that we pay for ourselves. Some things just fall outside of, even though we do have all these resources, there's some measures that just fall completely outside of that. Solar is one of them, electrification for the most part, but also things like pest remediation, pest management, which is a major deferral cause. So the coordinator is a very key role there to align all those partner programs, our own resources, and make sure everything's done in a short timeline and in the right order. So what this looks like, again, in practice, we start with our basic systems. We this is not really in the right order, I guess. Health and safety is our second primary concern, energy efficiency next, and then kind of these enhanced energy measures, for lack of a better term, where we think about solar, we think about heat pumps, and kind of electrification broadly. There's a big Venn diagram here of these things, right? They're not necessarily standalone measures. But in the way we think about this, it's definitely stabilize that home by addressing the basic systems, deal with the health and safety problems, and then we can start kind of envisioning what energy efficiency opportunities there might be. And I'm happy to just pause at any time, so if anybody has questions, just jump in. But otherwise, I'll just run through.
I think there is a quick question from Tabitha. Tabitha, do you want to ask a question?
So, yeah, and I don't have the chat open, so sorry about that.
Yeah, I was just wondering if the referral process you're referring to here is typical across all of the homeowner assistance programs in Philly, or is this something that your company or organization, I guess might be the better term, your organization has kind of developed on its own and is just specific to the way that you operate?
Yeah, you mean the sort of deferral prevention example that I gave with weatherization? That's us, right? Like the approach weatherization has had traditionally is we can't do this until asbestos is remediated. So it's just like sorry, get this taken care of somehow and come back kind of thing. So yeah, we're in order to do what we're aiming to do here, we've had to sort of work with every one of our partners and have them rethink their own processes, which has made this very challenging, as you can imagine. But once they see that it can be done, right? Like it's been a lot easier, like now that we're in production. But upfront, it was we were met with a bit of hesitation and skepticism because it is a bit of a departure from how they usually approach their programs.
Is that process development something that you guys have documented and are able or planning to share?
We are working with RMI right now to try to get that packaged in a nice way, but I don't have it documented and available, but what I do have is just like a giant folder of all of our sort of program documentation that I'm just super happy to share out with anybody who's interested. And it includes kind of our abstract version of our program procedures guideline, all of our contract template, RFP process, documentation, as well as kind of some initial program design documentation. But it's not in it's not a very approachable thing. It's just here's a bunch of documents. But again, happy to share that if folks have the bandwidth to parse through.
Thank you.
But, yeah. So
I've got a question that maybe you will address, maybe can't address. Just real quickly, when somebody has when you're working with a homeowner, you've done some measures, they don't have funding or you can't do it in one specific year, can they reapply, or are you inherently keeping them through multiple years?
That's a good question. No, and it's one of the things we're trying to work through. We actually have a weatherization enhancement innovation grant, and one of the things we're trying to formulate in that is what would this look like if we deliver this in a staged kind of over time kind of manner. And we're sort of we're billing that as something that WAP itself should consider, but obviously I'm considering how does that inform our program design. So right now we sort of do a project, whatever fits within our budget cap and our self-contained budget cap for what we can spend on top of all these other partner programs is $25,000. That's the threshold under which we don't have to deal with prevailing wage and Davis Bacon kind of documentation and costs. So given that we're limited to $25,000, we can't ever do everything, but we try to do kind of everything anyway. And so like we do close that project out, and there is the opportunity to revisit those homes. But right now we don't have a mechanism to sort of say like we got 80% of the way. Here are the remaining measures. We should like open this project up in 3 years, and that's when we expect it's sort of like the end of life of this furnace, or something like that. That's something we envision as like a sort of next step, but that does not exist in practice yet. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we're struggling with that with a similar program we're starting in Evanston, and yeah, this get everything done or planning on reapplying is really a struggle. Thank you.
Yeah, it's hard too because I think funders are always looking at just units, right? So we're already pushing the envelope by saying we want to just do more, and that means our money's not going to go as far, I guess. Like we're not going to have as many projects done. So then to say not only that, but we're going to actually come back to these same properties in 3 years or whatever it might be, that might have some kind of penalty for us. So just something to consider. But I don't necessarily let funders dictate how I run my program, but it's just like we always have to think about the spin and the politics of this. Okay, so I've had this slide up for a while, really just to show the sort of blend of partners that are actively engaged in the program. Everything on the left are participating sort of repair programs, utility programs, and then on the right, the wraparound service providers, legal ones being the primary ones we were tapping into, because we have a lot of folks who don't have clear ownership of their home in terms of like their name being on the title, and we have a lot of folks who come to us with arrearages, either for taxes or utilities. So we have to kind of get those things taken care of before we can start offering services. But we don't want to just say that's a deferral, right? We want to have a resource that's available to them and then bring them right back into the fold. That's really important for us up front. We have that resource available to hand them over and then bring them right back. Depending on the how long probate things takes and other issues take to resolve, but it's at least built in. Just a quick example of what this looks like in practice, including just showing off that the secretary came out to visit one of our properties, as well as our state senator. By like stacking these different programs, we were able to go pretty far in this property. It's not fully electrified, although to answer to kind of go back to that last question, like there is actually a second project envisioned here where we all we have to do is replace the water heater. We just didn't have the budget for it, incidentally, for this presentation. But we were able to stack together a local program called the Basic Systems Repair Program. It's funded by CDBG, HUD Community Development Block Grants, the Weatherization Assistance Program. Habitat for Humanity Philadelphia, our local chapter, is one of our partners that does kind of, we pay to do some of the services, but they also can use some of the repair funds in our homes. And then we supplemented with our own dollars. So what I'm showing here is like obviously a lot of moisture damage and repairs, and like a fully restored kitchen, and then also this heat pump and solar system, the inverter there. Those are all part of the same project, as well as some window replacements and other things. So by stacking, we were able to get pretty deep into this project. And a note on this one is she had like a gas furnace in the property, but her chimney, it was like an old, low efficiency system, like a draft system, and her chimney had collapsed, and she was complaining about chronic migraines. And when we came in, we did restore. Again, there's still a gas water heater, so we restored the chimney function, but also replaced that heater with a heat pump system, and immediately her headaches went away. So that was just like such an obvious example of health and safety problem that
Alon,
she can address.
Did you test the air quality in the house at all? I'd be curious.
I wish we had. Yeah, we have. This is like to my constant chagrin. Like we have a partnership with a local university to do some air quality testing, but we just haven't just haven't been successful in deploying monitors and really getting the protocol right. So if anybody has any suggestions, open to it. I'm trying to revisit that this year. But I wish we had been able to capture what the preconditions were in that home. I think
it seems like we're on the water heating world. There's a lot of jurisdictions moving to phase out combustion appliances for the outdoor air pollution, NOx and particulate. But the indoor, I've seen statistics from like 15 to 25% of indoor venting malfunctions, and you just gave a great example. And so that's all the, all the gases going into the home. So great to get more hard data on that. A good anecdotal story.
Yeah, it's a good anecdote, and I do wish, I wish we had the data to back that up, but could just show the measure list. I guess that's all we have for this project. And then just quickly, this is a little bit outdated, but mostly want to show the map on the right here, which is just a distribution of our the enrollments in the program. And I put this up just to demonstrate what we have no active marketing for this program. This is word of mouth, some community programs telling folks about it. And what we're seeing is concentrations in the exact areas where we want participation. So these are highly energy burdened communities, also high energy poverty, high health disparities, kind of you name it. Redlining maps also align with this still. And really, I'd bring it up just to say, you don't necessarily have to create geographic restrictions for your program, right? Like I think people with need will come to you, and being overly restrictive would mean that we would miss out on some of these folks who do fall outside of the really concentrated areas where they're still assuming that they qualify. We haven't done intake on everybody, but we do have folks at lower incomes living all over the city. So I think artificial restrictions aren't necessary. And yes, and we're also on the pie chart. We're about 100 projects deep now, all the way completed, and a lot in progress. And we're trying to continuously scale the program up. So that's part of our work at the moment. And then just want to go through a couple of examples of what this looked like in practice. Again, do some major, just kind of like basic repairs in these homes, getting them back up to functional standards with bathrooms, with kitchens. We've done, and I think this kitchen, sorry, not this one, but so we do have HVAC electrification. I don't have a water heater electrification example, but we have done a few, and we have done a window replacement. That's another heat pump. This is the same property I showed earlier. So I can pause for more questions, but I do want to kind of go through some work that we did with RMI to think through our electrification, like the decision tree, sort of, where it makes sense to electrify in these properties, and where it might be, a maybe or no. But before I jump into that, because I can't see the chat, I'll just pause for a second for questions.
I just want to say congrats on the 1,300 program enrollments. Seems like you guys are doing a lot good.
Yeah, a lot of enrollments and a lot of just telling people that it's going to take a while to get to them. It's the flip side of that. I think our throughput right now, we hope to do another 200 this year. So it's going to be really challenging to just manage that growth and the expectations too. So it's the flip side of the spread of the program, I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean, just starting a documentation process for people that are interested I've heard is one of the hurdles, is just getting people to start the enrollment process. So I think that's the good first step.
Yeah, and we have them just do like the briefest interest form, and then once they're up on the wait list, we do a much more intensive intake with them, and ask all the demographic and other kinds of questions and all the document collection. And so yeah, we have a lot of folks on that, and I would say maybe probably 10% of those 1,300 now are maybe not going to be eligible on income. or maybe somebody's a renter and misunderstood the program requirements. But we try to be very explicit on what qualifies you on that page above the form. And yeah, I think it demonstrates, if nothing else, how necessary the program is and how excited people are about kind of getting beyond that patchwork repair approach that's been done historically.
Yeah.
So again, I've had the slide sort of up here, so you all probably had a chance to read this, which is good because I don't want to go through it in too much detail. But what we did with RMI is basically a model-based analysis of taking a conventional Philadelphia row home, built in like the 1950s and has it's pretty poorly weatherized and not insulated, and all those kind of basically all gas combustion equipment is in place at first. And given that, if we walk into this home, like when is it right to electrify the various pieces of equipment in that home, and the outcome of that, besides these sort of high level bullets of if gas equipment's nearing end of life, basically across the board it makes sense, as long as we compare with weatherization, and then if we could do everything, it's like the best impact, obviously. But the kind of one of the major outputs here was like this kind of decision tree, right? Is like we come into the home. If we see that the piece of equipment is not nearing the end of life, then we probably should spend our money elsewhere, and try to come back to this property. And this obviously raises that big question of like how. But we should still do all pre-electrification that we can in that property. So assuming that we're not the ones to replace a piece of equipment, at least they're there, they're ready to sort of plug and play to the extent possible. And this is looking at heating systems, but it's essentially the same decision tree for a hot water heater, a hot water heat pump hot water system. And then, slightly different considerations here. I think we have a lot of concerns about climate readiness for our population, especially for elderly folks. I've mentioned the heat disparities early on. So trying to deliver cooling, wherever we can, like that is a big, like that does kind of push us over. And especially if the system's not all the way at end of life, we still might consider cooling as the driver for putting a heat pump system in. Again, not related to water heaters, but just want to raise that.
Alon,
Again,
I think the making sure that operational costs don't go up is going to be a tricky challenge on
yes.
heat pump. I just say anecdotally, I heard from a Northeast utility that I won't name yet because they're coming out with a study that showed they did a like by like building comparison, and they weatherized and air sealed everything and added heat pumps, and it was 1.7 times more operationally than the gas side. So
that's good to know.
I mean, I think it's a challenge. I think there are going to be solutions to that air source one. I think on the water heating side, the efficiencies are higher usually, and so you're in a better shape to not have any operational cost increase when going from gas. So I'll just say that.
Yeah, I think like that's what's made this so hard is the information we've seen. Like it's almost like anecdotal, and so we had RMI go through the more of a modeling exercise, but I think that study will be really interesting because it uses actual real world data, and yes, we're super concerned about like that increase in cost. And part of what we're doing is like anytime we do put a heat pump system in, we get solar on that roof just to like fully like de-risk and that project for folks. But obviously that's an additional cost, and also will limit then the number of properties that we can approach to do a water heater or to do a heat pump system in. And I just wanted to show this, which is like way too much information, not the best display, but the output of RMI is again just model driven review was that there's there are actually some scenarios where there's a bit of a penalty to put in some heat pump, and specifically heat pump water heaters. So I wanted to present this group because I think you guys might find you might have take issue with this output, and I would love to get that like have you tell me that this is not true, but we are seeing like a lot of cases it makes sense to just keep the existing gas water heater to basically not increase operating costs. But we didn't see then that penalty for heat pump HVAC. So again, this is one of the shortcomings of doing a purely model driven approach for making this decision. And I saw a hand raised, so
Yeah,
I can pause on this because again, I'm not here to defend necessarily this model, but just to present it and get your feedback.
Hey, yeah, I guess I should say we share some of your concerns with air source heat pump water heaters, unitary ones in cold climates, whether they always are going to end up saving cost versus gas. We have a project that uses drain heat recovery with water source heat pump water heaters. That's very, very much in the R&D stage of things. So it's not something you could implement today or help with the solution. But I would have to look in the specifics of the model, but we're also working on determining what COP you need in what climate versus gas efficiency of XYZ, where it will make sense and where it won't make sense for the operational costs. So yeah, I want to stay in touch with you for at least two reasons. One, to review the work we're doing and say, oh my gosh, this system is not feasible in low to moderate income family housings. It's more for multifamily. We're spinning off some ideas for single family. So we'll probably pass those by you. And I also have a backdoor to weatherization program. Minnie Malhotra helped write the equity white paper. And she did some interesting analysis in there, and she might be able to speak in more detail about what their analysis was at the time that they did it for what the SIR would be for a heat pump water heater versus insulation in the wall or something like that. She's got 10 years experience building energy modeling and such. So I'd love to put her in contact with you.
That sounds amazing. Yep, happy to have many more conversations about that. Yeah, and I can also loop in the RMI team that did this modeling just to make sure I have all the base assumptions that can relay back to folks. I have like a package that I could probably share with you, Joe. But yeah, okay, sounds good. Last thing I wanted to mention is IRA and just the way we're thinking about this. As it relates, I'm sure it's of interest to the group. So I just wanted to share our thoughts. So I don't know if it's as relevant for this discussion as I think, but so just to lay this out, like the way we're envisioning the market in Philadelphia and like broadly for electrification is it across these kind of income brackets and how we approach those sectors, basically on like what resources are available to lower costs for them, and like what I'm showing in the sort of bottom solid purple is the capital stack that's available to reduce costs. And as you get into higher incomes, obviously that the number of resources diminishes, and it's often monetized tax credits versus hard grant capital. But what we're looking at for Built to Last, which is what we've been describing, is like a grant, 100% grant funded approach to delivering all these different upgrades. Obviously, it's a very limited approach, and the fact that we're trying to aiming to scale up to 200 homes in a year gives you a good idea of like just how challenging that is to do. And in order to start really scaling up deployment of electric heat pump and other electrification kind of measures in these homes, we need folks to approach this on their own and help them do that in a number of different ways. So just kind of wanted to lay this out and just put it out in the world that like we're contemplating what different resources we can be providing to help this gel, I guess, for these other income groups to help, guide them to, understand these resources that are available to them to reduce costs and make that purchasing decision if it is a purchasing decision they're making on their own and it's not just like being given to them. And then, otherwise, our ideas for leveraging IRA broadly are driving, grant resources to community organizations, because again, I think to the extent that we're going to have people make personal decisions to invest in something, they're going to need a trusted third party that's not a government agency to tell them about those resources, and one that has the capacity to have those conversations and to, process grant applications or whatever it might be, that is going to help. Obviously, with all and I guess this is here now. I don't know what all these rebates that keep getting renamed, but we want to be able to use our grant rebates to the extent that we can, realizing that they're pretty limited. But we also are very concerned about how we use them. These are federal dollars that cannot be combined with other federal dollars, which is 99% of the dollars that we have. I'm sure other people are also worrying about this, but we want to basically use heat pump grants to put in heat pumps, but we know that our system costs far exceed the rebate amount. And so how do we actually fill the remaining cost and make sure that these systems are getting deployed to our lower income communities? That's a big question for us. And then, of course, providing guidance on accessing tax credits, maximizing solar for all. These are all sort of like the initial thoughts, I guess, that we have on utilizing IRA to kind of further all this work. And again, heat pump, water heaters, heat pump, HVAC, induction stoves. I'm kind of speaking broadly here. With that, this is me. Leave this up for a second. I'm super happy to. I think my contact should be in the invite here as well, but reach out if you all have any questions. And I will stop presenting, so I can.
Perfect.
Again, yeah. I don't know if I've actually ended my sharing.
No, I think we're seeing your.
Okay, give me a sec. Yeah, the non-screen shared version. How do I do this? Stop sharing. Okay, great.
Thanks, Alon. Really appreciate that, and really, yeah, thanks for coming on and talking about that really innovative program. I'd love to hear. So you said a couple installations so far of heat pump water heaters. Are there any kind of report outs on successes or challenges that you guys have had with the tech?
Yeah, interesting challenge. One primary one is space constraints in our, we have basements, but a lot of them being, pretty short basements. So we haven't been able to fit self-contained units in a lot of situations. The ones with sort of the compressor built in right on top. So I think that's probably prevented us from doing, heat pump water heating in at least 5 or so projects that I can think of. So we've deployed, I would say, I think 3 or 4 now out of those 100 projects, which is a very, very small number, even though it's kind of a primary measure. I think so. There's like physical constraints, and then there's budgetary constraints, and then I think beyond that, it's just the continuously reinforcing with our contractors and our auditors that this is like a measure we want to see done. I think that there's like there still continues to be a business as usual kind of fallback for folks as they develop, our partners as they develop the scopes of work for these projects, to sort of to do a like for like replacement, which has obviously been challenging for us. And yes, we're the program administrator, but given the volume, it's hard to kind of be on top of that, on a one-on-one basis. So part of what we're doing is trying to systematize that decision making for our partners and sort of have the burden of proof fall on them as to why they're not installing a heat pump water heater, or why they're not doing heat pump HVAC system when all indications are that they should be putting that in, and it won't be a cost burden for the family. As long as it passes that test, you'll have to tell us why we're not doing that. If it's that you can't, if it exceeds our program cost, fine. But otherwise, you know what I mean? Like we need that's not the way this has been approached, and it's just because like we've sacrificed, I think, that push for volume, and it's like an easy kind of place to find yourself. But
yeah, makes sense. Joe has his hand up. Go ahead, Joe.
Have you guys considered solar thermal at all? An interesting combination for heat pump water heaters could be solar thermal with a heat pump that's water source, which means you have a smaller form factor. You might fit it in a basement. But this is relatively R&D level thoughts.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they don't solve your immediate problems.
Yeah, no, I think it just is a level of complexity I don't think we're like ready to jump into. And like we run a solar program, so we have like a ready pool of solar installers. And in fact, what PositGen is in our market and provides solar lease that we've been basically piggybacking on to like really lower our costs to pay for those solar systems. So basically, all to say that like I'd rather, like from like a program execution standpoint, I'd rather just like put as much solar as possible on that roof and put in like a lower efficiency heat pump water heater, and just like get it done, if that makes sense.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah,
it makes sense.
Alon, we're working on one of the many task groups in the initiative is working on understanding some of the smaller form factors that are coming to market for those tight constraints, because that does prove to be an issue.
Yeah, I'm interested in that. How easy it is to deploy, the sort of detached, I guess, systems where, we can put the compressor outside. Maybe not the easiest solution for row homes, but that's not always the building. It is a predominant archetype, but it's not we also have a lot of duplexes or semi-detached and single family homes. So I'm interested in the ability to use those when there's space constraint, but I'm also interested in whether the group has seen any success with like the 120 volt, plug-in kind of systems. And I mean, I don't think that resolves the space constraint problem because those are even larger systems, but I think that it might help us with reducing cost on panel upgrades and running new circuits, which obviously adds to the total cost of the project.
Yeah, we are lots of that happening there. AWHI led the first field study in California in lots of different climate zones, and it was 30 homes and generally very positive user experience. And so and currently there's a Midwest field study going on with 120 volt, and we're expecting results in the first half of this year. So but lots of exciting. I've installed one in a home in Cleveland. So it's a really, I think it's a game-changing technology for the ease of installation. But there are upsizing. They recommend you get a bigger tank, and there's a lot on that topic. But definitely a really important tool in the tool belt for gas replacements.
Yeah. Well, to the extent that you mentioned these field studies, if we could be helpful there, to do case studies and help with deployment, I think as long as there's not a downside risk for our population, like we're like in,
oh, that's great. That's great to know.
So just sign us up to the extent,
Okay, that we'll take it on that. Yeah. Absolutely. I know, Sandy, we had a quick announcement. So I think, does anybody has any burning last questions for Alon, and then we'll get a quick announcement from Sandy, and then we'll close for today. Not hearing any last questions, Alon. Thank you so much for that presentation. Really, really appreciate it. I'll send out the recording on that, but really appreciate having you on. Sandy, do you want to give a quick announcement about the tech program?
Yeah, I think everybody heard that we opened the SGIP heat pump water heater under the auspices of now Tech heat pump water heater on October 31st. We did not at that time, though, roll out our equity incentives piece because we didn't have our income verification portal set up, but that is now live, and I posted the link in the chat above. So that rolled out this week. So we are finally able to take equity income verification requests. It is a full income verification piece because we have to follow the California State SGIP rules. So we have a service that will check all of the documentation to make sure that the customer meets the income qualifications, which vary from county to county. So that is a new service that is live. It is a $4,100.85 incentive if you are an equity customer meeting those qualifications. So we're very excited to finally get that up and running.
Amazing. That's a great incentive.
Yeah, hopefully in about 3 months, we'll be able to get some data for you and we'll see how our equity rollout is going.
Great. We'd love to have a report out on that. Thanks. Thanks, Andy. Yeah, thanks, Alon. Thanks, everybody. I think we are at time. I'll send out the recording and notes, and we'll see you all next month. Thanks so much for a great meeting.